When you listen to the campaign sound bites on crime, it can all sound really confusing. Republicans say a crime wave took off under President Biden and Vice President Harris.
She's presided over a 43% increase in violent crime.
Well, Democrats say crime dropped to a record low under President Biden and Vice President Harris.
Violent crime has dropped to the lowest level in more than 50 years.
And they claim a crime wave took off under former President Trump.
Violent crime was up during the Trump presidency.
Well, these claims from both sides all lack context, which is why they sound so confusing and contradictory. Here's what actually happened with violent crime based on FBI stats, along with the backstory. Crime went up before Trump took office under the latter part of the Obama years. And when Trump became president, violent crime came down a little his first year in office, then went down more his second year, down a little more in his third, and then shot up substantially in his final year in office. Now, his final full year in office was 2020, when the pandemic struck. Now, remember all the fallout from that. COVID put a lot of people out of work and in financial distress, along with the isolation that came with it and the waves of illness, death, and grief. And criminologists and psychologists say that can drive people to snap when they do interact and get into confrontations with others, fueling an increase in violent crime.
You're going to have a lot of tension and frustration building up. You're going to have a lot of anger building up.
And at the same time that violent crime went up, overall crime went down. Burglary, larceny, and property crimes all took a nosedive on the front end of the pandemic. So why is that? Well, it became much riskier for crooks to break into houses when so many more people were working from home. And it was harder for them to snatch purses, of course, or pickpocket or shoplift when fewer people were out shopping and more stores either closed or sharply reduced their capacities. Here in Florida in 2020, the state stats show overall crime in Florida dropped around 14%, while murder rose around 14%, and it rose more than that across the nation. In fact, in 2020, we saw the largest one-year increase in murders since they tracked and sorted the data going back to the 1960s.
I don't have to tell you, but this is madness. People do not want to live in this.
And by the way, when officials referred to a record increase in murders during the front end of the pandemic, they meant in total numbers. Their population has grown, so that doesn't mean that murder was more rampant than another point on record. In fact, when you adjust for population or murders per capita, the rate was higher in the early 1990s. So remember that when Democrats rip Trump for a surge in violent crime, and don't get confused by a second point that Tim Walz keeps repeating.
Violent crime was up during the Trump presidency. And that's even not counting his crimes.
Well, here Walz is conflating violent crime with Trump's 34 felony convictions for nonviolent crimes, which can sound misleading the way he keeps phrasing his soundbite.
Violent crime was up when Donald Trump was president. That's right. Without even counting his crimes, it was still up.
Trump was convicted of falsifying business records to conceal his hush money payments with intent to defraud. Those are felonies, but not violent crimes.
And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
Now, moving on to President Biden. He took office during the pandemic, and during his first year, 2021, 16 big cities across the nation had a record number of homicides. Murder in our nation's capital rose for a fourth year in a row, and Chicago police said they were under siege.
76 police officers have been shot or shot, standing in the line of fire since the beginning of the year, protecting the people of Chicago.
Now, here's that first year under Biden on the FBI bar chart. Now, we can see how violent crime in President Biden's first 3 years have been elevated from the norm, but also trending down, again correlating with the pandemic winding down. And to Biden's point, 2022 FBI data shows it dropping near a 50-year low. FBI stats show violent crimes continuing to drop from there, and the first quarter of this year, violent crime continued to drop, with murder down more than 26%, which again does not line up with what Trump is claiming.
She's presided over a 43% increase in violent crime. These are all government numbers.
Well, here Trump is citing a survey from the Bureau of Justice Statistics covering 2020 to 2022, or once again, the core of the pandemic, and not what happened since the pandemic eased and ended in 2023 and 2024. It's also, again, a survey, not actual arrest data. It's a sampling of respondents 12 and older who say they were victims of crime that were never reported to law enforcement, and it does not include murder, which shot up in Trump's last full year in office and went up in Biden's first year, and then went significantly down after that. In other words, murder shot up during the pandemic and went back down as the pandemic eased, just as violent crime did in general. All important context for the claims about crime we're hearing from both sides in the race to the White House.